As we'll see in just a minute when we break down our gospel for us here today, our Lord Jesus reveals to us just how incredibly loving God the Father is. In fact, it's nothing short of amazing or exhilarating or deeply, deeply humbling how much God the Father loves us. But in the first reading from Exodus, we see a God of wrath, a God who would consume the people who had sinned against him. So is this the same God? When our first reading, God is talking to Moses, and God says that he is not pleased at all that the people who got tired of waiting for Moses to come back from his time spent on the mountain with God have built a calf of gold for them to worship. Now, on one hand, we really can't blame God for his feelings, because look at everything he did to bring the ancient Israelites out of their slavery there in Egypt. The plagues, the incredible event that was the Passover, the parting of the Red Sea. Now here the people are saying to this newly forged image of a golden calf, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Can you imagine God hearing that and saying to himself, "Oh, so you think that lousy hunk of metal is the true God? That piece of gold got you guys out of Egypt? I should just wipe all you guys out, start all over again." That's how us humans would think. God the Father is not human. What we have to understand is this: anytime you see in the Bible a reference to the wrath of God, where God is threatening to wipe out a people because of their unfaithfulness to him, what it always means is that since God is love, love itself, not just a little bit of love, love on an infinite level, if love is not returned in love, there will always be consequences to pay. God's wrath is simply his deep, deep disappointment. His overwhelming yet tender love is not returned back with love from his people. Because remember, on Judgment Day, we're going to be judged on whether or not we loved ourselves more or whether we loved God more. There's something else going on here as well. As the writer Kathleen Norris once put it, idolatry makes love impossible. That's interesting. What does she mean by that? Idolatry makes love impossible. But when the Israelites made that golden calf, they tried to freeze God into an image. And God rejected that quite forcefully with wrath. There's no way God, the Almighty One, is going to be set into a mold, into an image. Idolatry, and there's still plenty of that going on in our day, makes love impossible because it reduces the other, in this case God, to something lifeless. And believe me, God's very much alive. A God of immense love. A love that doesn't sit still. A love that moves to touch the hearts of those whom God is trying to reach. So even though the picture of God the Father in Exodus is not quite as clear and as sharp as it will be in the Gospels, when our Lord Jesus reveals more of the fullness of the Father, still the God of love is definitely there in the Old Testament. But now let's see more about this God of love by looking at our Gospel. One that contains 3 parables about things that were lost. How much does God love you? He loves you so much, he's like a shepherd who leaves the 99 sheep behind in the desert and goes after the one that was lost. And we've heard that so many times, it's become kind of routine to us, right? It's like, oh yeah, well, Jesus himself said he's the good shepherd, so yeah, that makes sense. But here's the thing. Back in the days of our Lord, that would not be the definition of a good shepherd. There's no way a good shepherd will go after one crazy little sheep who got lost. Back in the day, sheep cost a lot of money. And so if one got lost, yeah, that would be kind of a problem. There is no way a shepherd would leave 99 by themselves and risk someone stealing them or a wolf eating some of them to go after one. It just doesn't make any sense. If one got lost, well, that was just too bad. That's not God. God goes after the one who was lost. God doesn't write off the loss. He goes after whoever is lost. That's a loving God. We see the same sort of thing with the next parable about the lost coin. The woman has 10 coins and she loses one. Now, the coin mentioned here will be about the amount that the worker would get paid for 1 day's worth of work. So yes, it would be a bit of an inconvenience, a bit of a disappointment to lose a day's worth of money, but you still had 9 coins left, more than a week's worth of money left. And now back in those days, obviously no electricity. In order to keep the houses cool on the hot months, there's only one window, typically up near the ceiling. So even in the daytime, houses back in those days were pretty dark. The woman, however, lights the lamp, sweeps up the place, and finds the lost coin. That's a wonderful parable symbolizing how God the Father sends his lamp, his light, our Lord Jesus Christ, to go and find us. And sweeping away the dirt in order to uncover us, that's exactly what the sacraments do. So once again, God, he doesn't just write off the loss. He doesn't stop until what was lost is found. But next we have the greatest of all of Jesus' parables, and the definitive testimony as to how God the Father truly is, especially when it comes to us. Jesus gives us the clearest presentation that shows us the heart of the Father. And the story of the prodigal son is actually the story about 2 lost sons, as we will see. The youngest, of course, has asked for a share of the inheritance, basically wishing that his father was dead, while the older son had stayed home. True, he's just as far away from the father as we will soon see. So the father's response to both of them is similar but different. So for the younger son, the father sees him go, just like God the Father sees us go whenever we wander away from him or from his church. But the father does not leave him, and that's the key. The heart of a father goes with him, and every morning the father waits for him to return, to come back home. You can never get away from the heart of the Father. The modern society in many ways is drifting more and more away from God, but God never loses sight of us. But then a young man, while feeding the pigs, the only job he could find, comes to his senses. He realizes something that many of you have realized, that many more of our loved ones have got to pray that they realize this. A terrible hunger has overtaken him, and not just a physical hunger, the hunger of the heart, the deep hunger for love. So remember this for the rest of your days. You might want to be kind of arguing about this, but you come to see that this is true. Whenever we have a great empty space in our hearts and a deep hunger for love, that's a sure sign of your distance from God. Whatever might have happened, you're away from him. Because even though you might have just a few good and true friends, if you're close to God, you're close to love itself. It means you're not lacking in love. You're not hungry for love. If you're starving for that, whatever happened, you put some distance between yourself and God, just like the prodigal son did. Let him close the gap. And so to the younger son, he returns. His father sees him off in the distance. He runs to him. Remember, you guys know this. Back in the day, running for an elderly gentleman was a very undignified thing to do. But he ran. God runs towards us. What a sight that is to see. Love, coming, running, to be with us once again. That can happen in so many different ways. Like a deep sense that you're forgiven when you come out of the confessional. Or a spark that lights up your entire being whenever you see or hear something beautiful. Or the realization, when you come back from receiving Holy Communion, you got everything you need for this life and the life to come. God is running towards you, not to destroy you, but to embrace you. But now what about the oldest son? His heart had drifted so far from his father, he forgot 2 astonishing things. First, he was not happy at all that the younger son came back. Instead of being right there by the father's side to welcome back his brother, he becomes all angry, all resentful, and refuses to come inside the house. He complains. He's been with his father all this time, has not even received a young goat to have a party with his friends. So the father firmly, yet lovingly tells him, "Son, everything I have is yours. Basically, the father is trying to tell the oldest son, are you that hurt? Are you that hard-hearted? You have forgotten that all the goats are yours? That all of what I have is yours? The oldest son, because his heart was lost from his father, had forgotten the benefits of staying home, of always being there. How many of us have forgotten the benefits of always being home, here with God in his church? The second thing the oldest son forgot was simply this. Not only did the father tell him that everything I have is yours, by implication, by extension, the father was also saying to him, as God the Father says to us, but also, everything I am is yours. We don't just possess occasional spiritual graces or blessings. We possess God himself. And that's why we should never wander far from home. He is home. We already have all that we need. So Lord Jesus, he tells us today 3 stories as the means of showing us how people get lost from God. Sometimes we wander off like sheep because we're not paying attention to the things that matter. We end up not being able to find our way back home. Or sometimes, like the coin, we slip away and find ourselves in the dark, waiting for somebody to come and rescue us. Or like the prodigal son, those times when we deliberately get lost. We go out in search of adventure and end up in a foreign place. Or like the oldest son, our hearts leave home even if we're physically stayed in place. But brothers and sisters, we are not made to stay lost. You're not made to stay lost. There's a Father who's always seeking us out, one who sent his own Son to search for us. When he finds us, there's always great celebration. As St. Thomas Aquinas once taught, joy is a possession of what we love. Let God the Father, the God of true love, possess you, and you once again possess him. So your joy, in fact your entire life, may now be complete.